everyone, SimsEclaire here, and welcome back to another Sims 4 speed build. So today we are building a community lot, actually, and it is in Forgotten Hollow. Now this is 2 builds in Forgotten Hollow in about the span of a week, so I hope that that's okay. But I really wanted to share this one with you guys because I got so much love for it on Twitter, and all my Twitter friends know that this lot did end up giving me some grief in the end because there was a glitch going on, but I did end up fixing it so I could take the screenshots to share this video with you. But anyway, this is a church. It's technically called Chiesa de Vampiro, but that just means Church of Vampires. And this is my entry for the Sims 4 Sparked challenges on the gallery. Now, I don't know if some of you, if you're not actually playing The Sims yourselves and you just like watching people build in The Sims, but the Spark challenges are basically designed around the new reality TV show, and they give you a theme and you have to follow it and build. You can build something, you can create characters, or you can do a story. And obviously I'm more of a builder, so I initially went for building first. I have considered, I think there's still about a week left, so I have considered building some characters and doing a story as well, so I will make sure to keep you all posted if I end up doing that. But this is the venue, and we had a couple of themes that we could pick from, and one of them was spooky, and I've kind of always wanted a Halloween wedding. I watched a TV show when I was younger. It was called 4 Weddings, and it was a competition show on TLC. I think that was the network it was on. And basically, like, you had 4 brides and they rated each other's wedding. And one of the episodes I watched, one of the brides had a Halloween themed wedding, and they did it kind of badly. It was very like cliche. There was gory, like, I don't know, it was very cliche, and I always imagined that I would do something more just like fall themed. But anyway, so when I saw that you could do a spooky wedding for this, I was really excited, so I went ahead and chose that as my theme. And I'm struggling with the roof a little bit here. I do end up cutting some of this out, and because it takes me a really long time to get the roof into a shape that I like, because I really liked the pointed like circular thing that you always see on churches, but it wasn't fitting right on the square building. But I tried to do a non-square building at the front, and it didn't look right in terms of the build, so I was trying to figure out how I could get it to work, and I think it looks okay in the end. In some of the screenshots you can see underneath the front part of the roof, but I think it's okay because you can't really see it in gameplay all that much. It's just how I was angling the camera. And here I'm going into debug. These are technically like statues from Jungle Adventure, but I sized them down a lot, and I put them on top of the different areas of the church to make them look like crosses. And I did put the crosses, they are technically upside down just because this is a Church of Vampires, but you could obviously move them back up. If you mind that, you can move the pieces back up so it forms a normal cross. But here I'm doing some architectural work. This build took a lot of time, and I'm actually really proud with how it turned out. I don't always do like super extensive, super crazy, like outdoor pieces, I guess you could say, like stuff like this. But because it was a church, and I figured it was an old church because this is Forgotten Hollow, most of the townies are vampires, so I figured that they pretty much just went along and like had built this church ages ago. So I wanted to make sure that there was a whole bunch of detail. It was one of those extravagant churches that you used to see everywhere. And so I googled a whole lot of reference pictures, and I found one that I really liked. It definitely looked a bit more abandoned though, but I didn't want this one to look as though no one went here, because there are humans that travel around in Forgotten Hollow, and I figured that I put this in the description in the gallery, but I figured that maybe this was a church where obviously the vampires didn't always go, but maybe it was like a joke in the town where they went here because it wasn't actually hallowed ground, and so they went to like fool the neighbors or something. But the neighbors were the ones that were like going to the Church of Vampires. But so I kind of figured like that was what it was. And I also figured the gravestones, because none of them are vampire gravestones except for the one at the front. I gave it its own little resting place. I figured maybe the gravestones were people like townies who had moved in, who didn't end up being turned into vampires. I don't know, that's just kind of what I was thinking. But because it is a little weird to have a church in like an area where there's vampires because they're all undead, and usually in movies and stuff they can't actually go into churches and everything. So that was just kind of like the storyline I was going with. It wasn't abandoned. They took care of it to kind of like play with their human neighbors, basically. Anyway, so I'm doing this. I skipped through a little bit of the architectural things. Basically, right now I'm just placing a whole bunch of stuff on the roof. Some of the roof pieces from what's it called? Get Together. And then I'm using these shelves as kind of like window decorations from vampires. And I also placed a couple of gargoyles around because I figured they would definitely have some of those. There's one like very like main gargoyle right at the front of the build as you walk in through the front door. And then there's these two on this side, and then there's some around the back as well. And then I just did a whole bunch of wall decorations, the stone ones. You saw some of the fountains lying around. You can see me placing some of those gargoyle heads in between those pillars right there. And I just did it to make the build look a bit more interesting. I do start landscaping a little differently this time around because I do a couple of spots and then like move on to a different area. But this is where I do end up putting trash cans here, and churches do technically have trash cans, but I don't know if you need them you need a waste disposal spot in lounges, which is what this will technically function as. So I thought that those would check it off, but they didn't, and I think it's because I grabbed them out of debug, but I totally forgot I grabbed them out of debug when I did that. I thought I was just grabbing trash cans. So there is another trash can in this build somewhere. I think it's in one of the bathrooms, maybe both bathrooms. But here I am. I decided to cover the church with overgrown leaves and ivy. I wasn't initially going to do this, but I thought that the church, it just looked like it needed something else. And I couldn't decide what I wanted to do because I felt like if I built more on it, it would look too much. So I decided just to go with some plant coverings. And I think it turns out good in the end. I tried to mix up the colors that I was using so that way it wasn't too samey, basically. But this is where I placed that gargoyle, and as I said, I do jump around on the landscaping, so I stopped with the front of the build with the ivy, and I'm starting to just fill up the area around the church. I put these two statues where they're called technically like the Forged Queens. I figured maybe they were like the first female vampires or something, or maybe just the first vampire. And then I'm gardening, or I'm landscaping, and I go into the debug for a lot of this, and I pull out a whole bunch of different plants from the debug menu for vampires. There's actually quite a few in there. I think I talked about this in one of my last speed builds, the one for the woodworker shop, because I was surprised, because most of the plants in this world are dead, but when you go into the debug category, a lot of them aren't. Like, you get these white plants that are sitting on the ground, and you have those purple and green ones, and then those giant purple leafy things. So I thought that it was kind of interesting that they weren't all dead, basically. And around here, around the fence, I placed these shrubs. These are base game shrubs, I believe, and then a couple of dead plants, and then those white plants that we got from the debug menu. I didn't want to place too many, like of the shrubs, like the colorful shrubs that we got, because I thought that it wasn't that realistic. I feel like you would have hedges covering the graveyard. At least that's how graveyards near churches look where I live. And then I'm just going around doing some more landscaping. I do end up raising these windows a little bit when I go inside because it looked really weird them being on the ground. Like, it looked good from the exterior, and then when you went into the inside, it just didn't make a lot of sense because they were the only windows that were on the ground. So I do end up raising those up once, because that is where the bathrooms end up going. But anyway, here I am going around, and I start doing the landscaping around all sides, and this is when I also believe I start to do the ivy. Yeah, so I start to put the ivy around, and I do cut some of this out because I actually finished the ivy and then went to go eat dinner and then came back to the build. So I decided that I would just cut out all the ivy because you saw me do the front, so you knew basically what I was doing. So I figured it would be okay if I cut out basically just 30 minutes of me placing ivy around the rest of the build. Anyway, here we are doing the outdoor area. So this is going to actually be, in terms of the sparked challenges, you had to make a wedding venue. So this is actually where the reception area is going to be. And it does lead right into the graveyard. And I thought that was kind of cool. You can see me pulling out the gravestones right now. And basically the larger area on the right is going to have all the tables and everything for everyone to sit at, and then the left is going to have a bar and a dance floor. And I think it ends up looking nice, but here I'm trying to pull out different gravestones, trying to figure out how I want to do this. Initially I was going to do like one huge graveyard, but I end up kind of splitting it into like 2 different sections. You can see me starting to do that here, because I wanted there to be a pathway leading up from that front gate to the patio where all the reception and everything would be. So I do end up, here I start drawing the path, and then I do a couple of different paths around so you can reach all the gravestones, because obviously people would come and visit their family members, so I figured that it would be very well treaded on, and they would probably have little paths leading to the different sections. And here I am going through quickly landscaping. I basically just pull out a whole bunch of the grass and the low-lying ground plants from the debug menu for vampires, because I thought it just made it look a little bit more realistic. I know graveyards are really well taken care of, but I figured in a town like this it would be a little bit more overgrown and a little bit more, I don't know, yeah, you know what I'm trying to say. I feel like it's still taken care of, like they all still look nice. I think it just definitely would have the patches of grass and the wild flowers all around. But anyway, you saw I placed a couple of plasma fruit trees in. I don't actually know if those are going to grow, because I initially placed one and it was a pile of dirt because it wasn't in season, so I changed that one over to this one, and this one didn't have a pile of dirt because it didn't change with the seasons. So I don't know if this one will actually grow fruit or if it's just technically there for decoration, but I thought it was kind of neat because, you know, obviously this is the vampire world, so having plasma fruit trees around would make sense. And there I was checking off what I needed for this to work as a lounge. So lounges are one of the venues you can have weddings at. I could have also made this like a park or something like that, but parks need barbecues, and I really didn't have any space or anywhere I thought would work to place a grill. I couldn't necessarily place a grill right in the middle of a graveyard, so I decided to go with lounge. And I think it turns out okay as a lounge. I mean, you can always change the lot over when you put it in your game to whatever you need it to be. But here I am picking out the tables for the reception area. So I went with the vampire table for the head table. I figured that was where the bride and groom would sit, or the couple getting married would sit. And then I did 5 of these tables. It looks a little crowded, but I'm pretty sure your Sims can get around. When I was taking screenshots, obviously this was a club venue, so there were people around and they could all walk around, so I'm pretty sure that it'll be okay. Your Sims will be able to fit. But I just placed a couple of decorations on the table. Each table has a set of candles for lights, some of those those leaf decorations we got from Seasons, and then I also went into the debug menu and grabbed out nameplates. I'm pretty sure that they're from Get Together. I don't know what they're for in gameplay, but I sized them down and placed those in front of the tables on the tables as though they were like marking who could sit where. So I thought that was kind of cool, because I've only been to one wedding in my life, but at that wedding we did technically have assigned seats. I was in the bridal party, I was a bridesmaid, so I didn't, but the tables themselves had little note cards on who was sitting where, so I figured that kind of fit. And then here we are going on to the interior. So I end up going with this wood paneling from Vampire Pack. Yeah, I think it's just called Vampires. So the Vampire Pack. And in the interior of the actual church, but this little area out here is all stone. And I put that plaque there from Get Together because a lot of churches at the front, they have like a little section where you can get your pamphlet for what the mass is going to be. And so I figured that would kind of work for that little section. And then I didn't know what else to put. I didn't want to crowd it up too much, so I think I leave it at that. And then this is where I'm trying to figure out what arch to use. So you need a wedding arch to get married in The Sims, and I was hoping that we had a black one, but none of them come in black, which is just a little weird. Like, I get it, most weddings you wouldn't consider having black arches, but I was like, really? You don't even have one? But I went with this one from Island Living. Technically it is 2 palm leaves, but I thought it kind of also looked like feathers, so I figured it would work. And I'm just building this altar area over here. I put that book from vampires, and I figured that would be where the person who was marrying them was reading from. And then I put a bowl here. I didn't really know what the bowl was for, but I don't know wedding ceremonies that well, so I figured that, I don't know, maybe it was just decoration, or maybe that's, I don't know, but I thought it looked cool. And then I put a couple of tea candles around. And again, I cut out me doing that rug, because literally the rug just goes right from the door to the aisle. And again, after I finished the rug, I left the game. So you can see me putting my cheats back in here. And each rug was like an individual tile piece, so it took me a while to get them all to line up, but I think it looks okay. And then here I'm taking these fall wreaths from Seasons, and I'm raising them up and placing them on the edges of each of the different pews. And then I'm also placing candles around. And you saw I cut that out too, just because it took me a while to get the candles in the right spot. But you can see what I did here. I basically just put the candles and then more of those leaf decorations that I used outside. And then the lighting changed because I took out all of those subtle saucer lights and I put in candelabras, like hanging chandeliers of candelabras. So that's why the light looks a little different, but I figured that I actually think it looks a lot better this way. And then I put books on all the pews, kind of to make it look like maybe that's like what they were reading from, like the Bible or something, whatever, like, yeah, you know what I mean. It's what they're reading from to do the wedding ceremony. And then I took a really long pause there, and I don't know why. Maybe it was because I knew I was going to need to catch my breath with this one, because it is a little long. And then I tried to do some floral arrangements around the altar because I thought it looked just a little bare. I don't know. I wanted it to look like there was a bit more flowers on it, so I started to try and use these. And I was hoping that I could get like something that looked like it was hanging off, so it looked like super overgrown. But I end up ditching this idea, and I spent a long time on it too, but I end up ditching it in the end, and I just grab out some of the pedestals from Vampire Pack. We got these like stone pedestals. I think you're going to see me pull them out in a minute. But I decided to go with those, and then with these autumn colored plants just on top of the pedestals. And then I also placed some more of the debug candles that I used on the floor to just make it a bit more cohesive. And some of these don't exactly line up. I didn't use my red shelf because I was just doing this really quickly, so some of them are a little above the pedestal, but you can't really tell until you get into the screenshot. So I think it's okay, and you can always fix them or delete them if you put this into your game and it really bothers you. But so here I'm trying to pick out something to put on the walls, and the walls aren't bare because they have the paneling on them, but I figured that they would have some sort of pictures on them about like the history of the town. So I went into the different Count Vladius Strahd paintings of like the different family members, and I just used all the different colors of the different pictures so I could kind of make it look like they had like their family history on the walls, because I figured they were definitely the family who built this church. And then you also saw I added that tapestry right above where the altar is, so I thought that was kind of cute. And then here I'm just doing a little seating area. I wasn't really sure how to fill up this hallway. Initially I have this like statue back here, but I found this fountain, so I decided to switch it up with that, and I figured maybe you could walk through here and go visit the fountain or something like that. But here I do have a little seating area. I just put a plaque and then a couple of shelves with some lights on it, and I figured maybe this is where the person who's marrying them or whatever came and sat before the ceremony, or people could come and sit during the party to get some fresh air. Not that there isn't a whole bunch of fresh air, because the whole party's outside, but you know what I mean. And then I didn't know, as I said, I was having a real hard time decorating this area because there wasn't a whole lot of wall space because of the open archways, so I decided just to place a couple of old looking rugs. And then this is where I go into the bathrooms. So there are 2 bathrooms. I do end up changing how this looks a little bit. I do end up putting like a really teeny tiny hallway in the center. You can see me starting to build it right there, and it's a little awkward, I'm not gonna lie, because it is so small. but I think it works because I didn't want to turn this whole thing into a big bathroom, because as you can see, it literally looks out into the reception area. So I thought that that was a little weird if the whole thing was just a giant bathroom. So I did decide to do 2 small ones, and I just used these the vampire bathroom stuff to kind of make it cohesive for the build. And I also used the same chandeliers that I was using, and you saw me cut that out right there. It was basically me just trying to find something to put on the walls of the bathroom so that way not everything was super bare. And then I go through and add some curtains around, and this is where I placed the waste baskets, because I realized that I still needed them for it to check off as a lounge. And then this is the last thing that I do in this video. So I raised up all of the windows, you saw me do that, and then I try and find some curtains that'll fit. But as I said, that is it for this video, so I hope you all enjoyed it, and you stick around for the next one, and I will see you all then. Bye! Thank you.